Okay, so we're going to review chapter 6 through 9. You ready? I actually printed out your notes because they were so good. I showed Mr. Carter the notes, and he was like, those are Omar's notes? That's awesome. So, a couple of things I left out yesterday that I wanted to make sure we went over. Did we talk about the air raid at Buna? So the air raid at Buna happens. They're dropping bombs on the factories, and all the prisoners are in the camp, and they're seeing the bombs drop. Do you remember how they feel when that happens? You would expect them to be, but they're not. They're actually super excited and happy about it. Because if the Nazis' buildings are destroyed, the Jews win a little bit. Does that make sense? If they destroy the building where they all have to go work, they don't have to work there anymore. If they destroy the concentration camp, they can get out. So they're happy. Let's see. Something that I don't think I made clear before, too, was, you know that question we talked about all these things dehumanize Ellie? We talked about the eating food off the ground. That one, the question is, all these things dehumanize him except this one thing. And there's only one answer that doesn't happen, and that's the Christianity one. So I wanted to make sure we didn't confuse you yesterday with that one. Remember we talked about that a little bit? Okay. So if it says all of these except, that's what you need to pay attention to, is the word except. Okay. So chapter 6, we talked about he has surgery, his foot's infected. So they have a choice to make. They can either go on the march or they can stay at the hospital. And Ellie and his father, they can stay together either place. Do you remember what choice they make?
They went with the march.
Yeah, what do they think is going to happen at the hospital?
That they're going to get taken.
Exactly, and what actually happens?
They get released.
Yeah.
The next day.
Yeah, so they get rescued, and that's the irony of it, is that they could have been rescued if they'd stayed at the hospital, but they expect to be killed, so they go on the march instead. It's the Night Master Test retake. It should be the first thing on the wall. That's your results from last time. So go back to home, and it should be one of the very first things on the wall that says Night Master Test retake. Alright. So on the march, the one thing that's really important is Rabbi Elihu, and he is the older guy whose son is with him the whole time. So he and his son are together, and then they go on the march, and the son gets away from the father, and the father's he spends days looking for him, and the son really doesn't want to be with his father anymore because his father's getting weak. So Ellie sees that, and he thinks, I don't want to do what that kid did to his father. So he prays to a God that he doesn't even believe in anymore to say, I need the strength to not abandon my father when I feel like abandoning my father. Out of 1, guys. Out of 1. And then they finally get to the town where they stop for the night, and they all kind of just like pile on top of each other, and they go to sleep. And there's some drama with he and his father needing to stay awake and then falling asleep and being in the snow.
Unless they were taking turns?
Yes, they were taking turns at first because they knew if they fall asleep in the middle of winter when it's snowing, they're probably not going to wake up. And a lot of people didn't. A lot of people died that night. The next day, they start walking again, and they get to another concentration camp called Gleiwitz. Yeah, Glei. WITZ.
Gleiwitz?
Yeah. An I before the W, too. Doesn't really matter. It's resetting the thermostat? Awesome. I don't think it ever left holiday mode anyway, so.
Yeah, it might not have.
They get there, and then they all pile, like they all are so exhausted that they kind of fall into a massive pile of bodies. You remember this part where they're like, he can't breathe because there's bodies on top of him?
So that's pretty much what you made it to.
Yeah. And at the bottom of the pile, he hears a voice. Do you remember who that is? He hears his voice saying, "Help me, I can't breathe, I can't breathe."
Was it the dude from earlier?
Mm-hmm. It is Juliet. Good job. And Juliet has carried his violin on the 42-mile trip from, what is it, Buna to Gleevitz, which is pretty impressive because he's running for 12 hours straight. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. And you know, sometimes the kids will go up there and push the button on it. Anytime the holiday mode's turned on, just push the down button until it gets back to zero, and then hit the button that says holiday and we'll shut it back on.
Okay, cool.
Turn it all back on.
Thank you. That's helpful.
Yeah, no problem.
And that's on video, so I'm going to remember it. All right. So Juliet is at the bottom with his violin. He kind of finally makes it out, and then there's this scene at the end of chapter 6 that's supposed to be like the kind of pinnacle of the novel. Do you remember what Juliet does? So Juliet has a violin with him. He does play his violin, exactly. He plays his violin, and he plays a song by Beethoven. And the reason that's important, that he's playing Beethoven, is that Jews weren't allowed to play German music, and Beethoven is German. So why would you, exhausted, almost near death, play your violin and play a song you weren't allowed to play?
Well, what's the last one?
It is his last moments. So with the last strength that he has in his body, he plays a song he's not supposed to play. Why do you think he does that? It's a tough question. If you were in that situation, and you weren't supposed to do something, and you knew you had one more act left in you, and you decided to do it.
I'd do it just to calm everybody down.
Okay, so that's a reason that he's probably doing it, to make other people feel peaceful. It's probably also about resistance, though, because if he's had everything taken from him, he has one thing left. He can play his violin. They've told him not to play this music. He's going to play it anyway. Do you remember in Amandla when they said that? They didn't want us to sing, but we're going to sing anyway, because it doesn't matter what they want. This is our fight back. That's what this is. It's all about resistance.
So he played it for resistance.
Mm-hmm. How much does this worth? A lot. It's like 2.5 pages tops. Type double space. It's a story. You make up a story. About anything. It's fictional, so it's you make up the characters, you make up the setting, you make up the genre. It can be science fiction, it can be anything. Okay? The theme has to be overcoming obstacles. So you have to make the story show the big idea of overcoming obstacles. You can use a situation from the book, but you can remake it into fiction. Chapter 7. So that was all chapter 6. Chapter 7 is there at Cleevitz, and it's the middle of winter still. There's no food. They're getting very little food and water every day. And Ellie's father gets pretty sick. I feel like I'm forgetting something from chapter 7. I feel like... Oh, you know what? Chapter 7 is the violin as well. This is more chapter 8, so it doesn't matter in terms of this, but chapter 8... Yeah, that's fine. We'll just leave it like that. You can actually put 7 through 9, since all of these kind of happen at the same time. Do you remember why his dad's sick, or what he gets sick with?
Water infection?
Yeah, where he can't drink any water. It's called dysentery. Spelled D-Y-S-E-N. D-Y-S. And T-R-E-Y. T-R-E-Y. Yeah, there we go.
Sensory.
Okay. And dysentery made him really, really sick to the point where he can't even get up out of bed to go to the bathroom. So he's just sitting in his own feces, basically. And so everyone around him is grossed out by it, and they start stealing his food and beating him in the hopes that they can kill him off. And then his dad finally, they have this moment, they talk to each other for the last time, and then Ellie goes to sleep, and he remembers the date. I think he says something like it's January 17th, whatever it is. And when he wakes up in the morning, what does he see? Remember, he looks over at the bed. He looks over at the bed and he sees that his father has been taken away in the middle of the night to the crematory. He doesn't know if his father was still alive when it happened. He guesses that he was still alive, but he's gone. What would you expect Ellie, to feel when his father's killed, essentially? You would expect that, but he doesn't. He just feels relieved. Which is sad. It is weird, yeah. But he feels relief because now he doesn't have to take care of his father every second and give half of his food to his father every day. Because remember, his father wasn't getting his own food. People were stealing it from him. So Ellie's giving his father his own survival. The irony of all of this, though, is that even though his dad is such a burden to him at the end, his dad is the reason he survives for so long. Do you remember at the beginning? He and his father aren't close at all. In fact, they're barely even friends at the beginning. And through the course of the book, they rely on each other. Exactly, and so they rely on each other for survival. And so even though he's relieved when his dad dies, his dad is the reason he survived so long. There's only two more things we need to talk about, and then you're ready to take the test. The last line of chapter 9, there's a quote about, "I looked in the mirror and I saw a corpse looking back at me." What do you think that means?
It's like he sees the old. This is like he sees the old him.
Mm-hmm. And the old him is dead, right? And is he literally dead, though? No. So there's a question that's like, which of these can you infer? Turn it down to 1. Gentlemen, turn it down to 1. Thank you. He looks in the mirror and he sees his old identity is dead. He sees his body looks like a corpse, but he's not physically dead. So that's an important thing to remember on that one. There's one last question we haven't talked about, and it's kind of a weird question. It's a quote from the beginning of one of the chapters, and it's like, "Anguish, the German soldiers' heads, helmets were a death emblem, a death's head," something like that. So when you have something that's not a human, and you give it a human emotion or characteristic, like having a head, do you remember what that's called? It's a literary device. Starts with a P. Yes. So anytime you take something not human and give it a human emotion, there's personification. That's it. Any other questions? I think you are ready to rock this bitch.